Hola, buenos días.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this interesting session that may involve a lot of our interest because it's a context that we have been hearing a lot in the news. It's in fashion right now. It talks about child protection when moving towards the Darien Gap, and we're going to talk about challenges and debate about the solutions. I'm pleased to introduce you to the team that accompanies us here. This is a group of experts who's going to explain to us the work that is being done at Darien and in the context of Darien to protect our boys, girls, and adolescents. To introduce you to the panel members, I want to let you know that there's news and statistics that reflect that many children have crossed this dangerous path by themselves on many occasions and also accompanied with family groups and larger groups. Many of them are less than 5 years old and they have specific needs. This trip represents danger to the migrant families, including small girls or younger girls and pregnant women. They are especially exposed to the situations of gender and sexual violence along the way. Abuse, extortion, kidnappings are reported frequently. With children in a movement, there's an urgent need for humanitarian action that is backed by resources. Uh, we are going to talk about the risk in child protection in one of the largest displacement crises in our region. We will also talk about the strategies and opportunities detected in protecting children. And we are also going to talk about techniques that have been created on the fields and adapted to the context of mixed flow displacement. Within the highlights, we will find the service of child protection, the complementing of humanitarian section and organizations, and the mainstreaming of the proper use of resources. But we're going to talk about specific risks in protecting children, such as human trafficking and sexual violence in both sides of the border, both in Panama and in Colombia. That there's a gap in boys, girls, and adolescents that within the legal frameworks and the rendering of services. We will also evaluate the work that is being done by the mobile teams and the abilities to be able to respond to the specialized needs that can save lives. Functional coordination with clear lines of communication is an essential way to avoid duplication and to provide efficient response to child protection needs. And the need for coordinated regional response for children in movement and greater attention and investment by the international and regional organizations of all types and more user friendly policies towards the children. Before beginning the presentations, I am going to introduce you to our speakers for today. First, we have Vladimir Romero, who's a specialist in child protection for UNICEF Panama. Vladimir works as specialist in child protection in the office of UNICEF, and his place of work is the Darien. He specialized as social worker in support in different ranges for children and families recognized or acknowledged as victims of conflict affected by immigration crisis and other scenarios of risk and vulnerability. Has shared with government agencies as well as with international NGOs and with the UN system. Describes himself as a human being that respects dignity with a need to serve and help those that most need it. Listens unapologetically and provides a source of consultation as well. Welcome. Carolyn accompanies her. Carolyn is a specialist psychologist. Is the case management officer for Red International. Caroline was born in Panama and is a psychologist with more than 18 years experience in work in different types of intervention for promoting mental health. Her main focus has been the study of the emotional and cognitive development in childhood and adolescence, talking about learning disorders And there's prevention of suicide and due to gender-related issues, and works on psychosocial case management officer for Red International Organization, talking about the entire context of children who are in movement or have been displaced or separated due to the transition through the Darien Gap. Francisco Cristian Pulido is a humanitarian director for Plan Colombia. He is focused on the defense of human rights as well as in the coordination of humanitarian response and the strengthening of relationships between government and communities. And with a professional career of more than 14 years, has implemented social policies with special emphasis in protection of children and adolescents, as well as in attention in vulnerable communities. Polizo has masters in rights and political science, as well as in peace building and in human rights and economic governance. Amongst his most recent postings has been the work as the national director and communities in the Institute of Family Wellbeing, subsecretary of ensuring human rights in Bogota, as well as a legal advisor at the Ombudsman Office during the COVID pandemic 19 in the administrative department for the presidency of Colombia. He is currently the humanitarian director and stabilization in Plan Colombia. The time that he changes, he also shares his experience in as a teacher for a master's in political sciences and constitutional rights in recognized universities in Colombia. And finally, we have Oliver Bush. He's the country coordinator for Panama for HIAES. He is a master's in public policy in Francisco Vitoria University in Spain. More than 20-year career in experience within the Americas, and he has played different posts: university teacher, professor, advisor for the Mexican Senate, humanism politics advisor, which is an interinstitutional agency for immigration in Mexico, technical secretary for the Mexican Consulting Council, technical secretary for the interinstitutional table on migrant unaccompanied children, consultant, regional technician on immigration issues, as well as a regional coordinator for migration for the Red Cross and internal displacement for Mexico and Central America, as well as a regional advisor for migratory policy for Central America. And since 2021 has been working in IAS as country coordinator for Venezuela first, and now as country coordinator for Panama. Welcome to everyone. Thank you very much, Mariana, for your presentation. Thank you, colleagues. Welcome to everyone. Greetings to those of you who are here in the on-site, as well as those who are getting our transmission live. It's an honor to be here this morning. As I said, my work is a specialist in child protection for the Office of UNICEF in Panama, and today currently I'm in charge of doing this presentation on the support that we're providing to the Republic of Panama at this immigration crisis that has been increasing since 2018. Our presentation is going to be in Spanish, and I want to begin by talking about the migration management process in Panama. This is under the purview of the Ministry of Security. It is being done through a strategy called controlled flow operations, which, as the name states, it means registering and controlling the migrants and refugees that travel through the Panamanian territory. It is important to state that currently Panama has not decreed an immigration crisis, which has made the humanitarian response a little bit challenging when facing this context. I want you to be able to see the slides while I keep telling you what the support that UNICEF has looked like for the last 3 years. There have been 902, 900, 1,905 migrants traveling through Panama, and refugees from over 100 different nationalities. 183,402 were boys, girls, and adolescents, meaning they were 50% of this amount were children under 5 years of age. Just in 2023, as Mariana has mentioned, 520,000 people have transited the Darien immigration pathway, and 25% of them are women, and 22% are boys and girls. During the first quarter, during the first quarter of 2024, more than 110,000 migrants and refugees have crossed the border between Panama and Colombia using the Darien route. From these, 24,268 are boys, girls, and adolescents. This represents 22% of the total amount. It is important to talk about the immigration profiles. We have identified that 64% of these people that are traveling through the Darien Gap are from Venezuela nationality. Uh, close, their Ecuadorian nationality is 8%. Haiti represents 7%. Colombia 6%. And other nationalities, as I mentioned previously, more than 100 different nationalities. In addition to this, I want to highlight that 12% of the total number of immigrants that have traveled through Darien are extracontinental, meaning people that come from Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, from places as South Sudan, Afghanistan, Ghana, and other countries. The photographs that we have are a clear proof of what it entails crossing this jungle. We have tried to find more user friendly photos because the realities are very harsh, and due to the privacy and for respect to the people that have gone through this journey, we have decided to omit certain photos. But as you know, the Darien route is one of the most dangerous immigration routes in the world. Immigrants and their children are exposed to multiple risks, not just environmental risks such as the exposure to wild animals, insects, climate, which is a tropical climate. It's a dry forest where humidity and heat is exhaustive. And in addition, during winter, it becomes very difficult. The river currents end up being very harsh, placing even at greater risk the people that are crossing through the route. Even then, they're facing other additional risks such as violence, including sexual violence, human trafficking, and extortion from criminal groups. Facing this difficult context, UNICEF, together with the allies, Global Brigade, Red Cross, Panamanian Red Cross, sorry, provide spaces that save lives, secure, humane, and efficient services that have to do with food protection, drinking water, by providing safe, child friendly spaces, preventing gender based violence. We have a space for taking care of women and girls, as well as child maternal health protection services. This is offered 7 days of the week in seven critical elements for attention that have been identified as predominant for those that have been crossing this gap. As I mentioned in the conversation, boys and girls represent 20% of the mixed flow demographic. That means that at least one out of every five immigrants is less younger than 5 years of age. Uh, Girls represent 47%, of this infant population. According to the Panamanian Immigration Services, we've identified children from more than 50 nationalities. Since the beginning of care and attentions, meaning 2015, case management or protection case management has become a proffering to save lives. We can see here in the photographs a case manager who was accompanying us at that moment during an engagement with children and their family. They identify with for the different risks of violence, physical, sexual, and emotional violence in children, children that have been separated from their parents, and their parents still haven't crossed the jungle, children that have lost their paperwork, or children that face other protective based child protective based situations. And that is where we want to ensure that we support unaccompanied children. We understand that there's been an increase in the last few years. It's important here for you to know that in 2020 we had one person dealing with case management, and because of the situation we've gone from one case manager to having 12 case managers in the fields starting in 2024. In the photos, we can see the case management processes for children traveling alone or unaccompanied. This number has increased significantly. In 2022, for example, it was 1,067 cases that had been identified and registered. In 2023, we have identified and registered 3,300 cases of children that are of unaccompanied minors. And 2024 to the date, there have been more than 2,000 cases that have been identified. During the initial engagement that we do when we identify children and we began the implementation of case management, as I mentioned, we assess the needs that the child has. They mainly include physical needs. Crossing a jungle is not easy and generates physical risk, open wounds, tiredness, hunger. There's also situations of family reunification and emotional support. The child is remitted to the different services that we offer in the fields that UNICEF offers together with its allies and other cooperation agencies and the UN system. This to provide some sort of additional support that might mitigate the initial situation where we identify the child. At the same time, we do the referral of the case to the Panamanian government, to the corresponding authorities, so that they can determine what final protective measure can be taken for this child. Understanding the right for ulterior response support. The psychosocial support that we provide focuses on the emotional needs of boys and girls. What is the purpose? It is to decrease the emotional impact that children may experience after having gone through this immigration process. But this has resulted in difficult challenges, especially those case managers on the field. 50 different nationalities means that intercultural communication becomes difficult. We've had to find a way, and I think that it was mentioned previously, of how through different techniques such as drawings, communication techniques where children can express what are their needs. We have some translators, physical translators or interpreters there to be able to understand what the child wants to tell us or to assess the child's needs as well, initial child's needs. It also means new engagement challenges focused on early childhood and focused on psychological first aids. Together with the team on the field aid, working with them means certain challenges: self care and self assessment and protective services for the mental health of those workers. we will know about how this impacts the emotional well-being of these people working this process. I want to close my presentation here, and I want you to see this video that we have prepared, and where you can see the attention that our case managers provide on the field, so that we can understand what is the engagement or the approaches that we deal with these children, especially with children that are being separated or unaccompanied, or children with other needs for protection that require assistance when crossing this Darien gap or this dangerous route. Thank you.
A little bit to share with you while we're working on the video issues, the history, the story of this child that we're going to watch is an unaccompanied teenager, 15, 16 years old. He crossed the gap two times, and he went all the way up to Mexico and was sent back to Colombia, and then he made the decision of walking the migration route again. So we initiated a company process to identify his needs. We found out that the country of origin didn't provide support group. His mother was in the U.S., so the better option was to meet with his parents or his family. Okay, so we can pass the floor to our colleague. Yes, we apologize. It's just a matter of a technological issue. Um, Good day. My name is Caroline. I am a psychosocial worker with in Panama. We're implementing partners from UNICEF. We have spoken all this week about statistics and numbers, things that obviously are important, but I would like to share with you my experience on the field, on a day-to-day, what we come across every day. So, from my personal experience, I would like to mention that during my career, I always wanted, I always had a goal to do something that was meaningful and to leave a footprint. And I can say now gladly that case management has allowed me to achieve this goal. To see that gratitude in their eyes, that glow in their eyes between tears and smiles, when we can reunite families, or simply when we can provide truthful information, that's very fulfilling. As a professional, I can say that it's a job that doesn't have a schedule. You're always on call. It's a very hard job that we all do. It's not only me, as Vladimir mentioned, it's a team of 12. So we do as much as we can to support and guarantee protection on the field. Um, we start there as soon as we receive the subject. We have a psychosocial support team, a good team on the field. Mainly what they require is information, truthful information. There is a lot of biased information online and everything. So when you offer that information, these are the services you have access to, these are the proper routes, they feel calm because of that support. And we also have connections with other government entities. The first person who's in charge is that childhood specialized representative. We bring the cases to them so they can upload the protocols, and then the authority, which is National Secretariat for Childhood, Adolescence, and Family, they can analyze cases and then refer them. Is the video going to be played or after I finish? Okay. So While each case we receive are a bit different, I could summarize the concrete actions that we go over. First, to identify and verify all minors. As you saw on that picture, in that picture, every when the migrants arrive, they arrive in dugouts, so they get to the that transitory reception station. So we're there all day long until we receive the last dugout. So that guarantees that we identify every child that arrives. So we identify risks, and then we derive or triage to other international corporations or the services they require based on their needs. We support providing access to calls or video calls between those children and their parents or their caregivers. If they arrive in Panama without any authorization letter to be accompanied by someone else, if they're just alone or in groups of relatives like cousins or friends without any paperwork, the authority supports them. So that unit can get in touch with the parents and share with them what the process is so that can be taken care of, and those children can travel with a document that states who they are. We also have care space in Bajo Chiquito. It's the first community of reception. Once they exit the jungle, they get to Bajo Chiquito. In that location, we have a care site where we guarantee healthy food depending on their age. And also care, because we have caregivers there. And I will explain how it works in Bajo Chiquito. They exit the jungle, they arrive to Bajo Chiquito. That same day, they cannot leave and travel. They have to stay overnight so they can travel the next day in what we call a biking operation. That's done by law enforcement like Senafron and Senan. So every day they have to climb on a dugout and travel downriver 3 4 hours to the first station. So they're there and they guarantee their food and everything there. After that, we have all the reports in Lajas Blancas where they arrive. We know who they are, when who are those who do not have any caregivers or anyone accompanying them. So we derive them or triage them to the unit of Niñez, Adolescencia y Familia. So once they arrive to Lajas Blancas, we triage and we provide the services we have there with the other international corporations. Within good practices, it's very satisfying to mention that we have a great coordination within the different agencies for the protection of everyone who's passing through Panama. We have a human mobility mechanism that is cooperation mechanism within the different agencies. They do not have to be necessarily part of the United Nations or receive funds from United Nations. Anyone who's on the field can be part of this table to participate in the coordinations. They meet once locally and quarterly nationally. So we can also mention that we have a technical board for mental health. This is the result of a cooperation of all the mental health workers and psychosocial workers on the field with the aim to avoid re-victimization. In the past, there were a lot doing similar things, and you would get a group, and a colleague would have to repeat what the previous colleague said. So, with this board, we coordinate strategies so things do not have to go through the same victimization process. This is a great achievement. This board provides feedback to that. Health subgroup that meets nationally as well. And as Vladimir mentioned, case management in the Darien Gap is a bit different to the rest of the places in the route, because this case management is done in hours. they don't stay there too long. So all these processes have to take place in a swift way. So it doesn't give us a lot of time to do a lot. So we have to support with the other agencies. So within this friendly space where we have this routine that they arrive in the river, we bring them to the station and go back to the river. While we have that friendly space, when we have that group that takes care of children and they follow the protocols and every management needed with the authorities, we also have a space for women. We provide workshops and we have support with psychosocial groups for sexual violence or vulnerability. While we go down to the river and bring the kids up to the station and on and on, these things are happening in the background. So, despite we have a child protection law in Panama that it's only 2 years old, you are experts and you know that we have a battle because we need to ensure that everything written down in that law is taken to practice. So we hope and we need the government to feel our support and not that we're competing with them. And the aim is to achieve our goals. So that's it. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, now we have the intervention of Christian Pulido Acuña. Well, again, it's a pleasure to say hi to each one of you. My name is Francisco Pulido. I am a part of Humanitarian Action Plan in Colombia, and I want to share a little bit of our experience in implementation of several projects that we have in implementation in the Darien region. Our colleagues from UNICEF and their implementation partners shared with us the context. In other presentations, we have seen it too. So, what we want to do here is to highlight the specificities of what happens on the Darien Gap on the Colombian side. Um, when we were preparing this presentation, we wanted to share with you what this region is. A lot of you and us believe that the Darien is only a jungle, but it has specific different things in each side. In the Darien side, on the Colombian side, is part of a municipality and a department called El Choco. Um, there are the municipalities have different levels. In these cases, they are of a sixth category. They have mainly basic needs that are not satisfied, very below the national media or average. So I would like you to pay attention to that map on the left corner top. Um, what you see on top are sea routes, and the route that is used in the Darien is one that starts in Medellin, the second economical most important city, and it ends up in two places, Turbo and Ecocli. They are part of the Antioquia department where we can identify three ports that operate in a regular base. They have all the permits that can be issued by authorities in Colombia. They work regularly, and through those two piers, these amount of people has transited, and out of those, 23% are girls, boys, and adolescents. We didn't have an operation from the very start of the migration flow, but we have followed up the Venezuelan migration since we had uh, uh, projects in the border with Venezuela, particularly in southern Arauca. So we identified those migration flows that transited through our country and the continent. They acquired the resources and they initiated their transit through the Darien. Venezuelans or from a Venezuelan origin are not the only ones transiting. There's people from Ecuador, from Haiti, from Asian countries, particularly from China. Others who started their flow from Chile, many of them from Africa, and all of them converge in those two places, in these two ports in Candí, and they start a transit of 94 kilometers jungle strip um, that migration started perhaps during 10, 15 years ago. That started with Cuban migrants, and they had the first contacts with the communities across the route. That is not a territory that's not inhabited by anyone. There are indigenous populations and black communities that organize themselves in communitarian councils. In my Colombian colleagues know that very well. And these communities started receiving this big flow of migration. At the beginning of that migration, they wanted to provide and help and serve these migrants, but then it increased, right? And these or communities started becoming organized and became organizations that started seeing this as a source of income. So Colombia is a country that, despite the migration phenomena, doesn't stop having issues. For example, the armed conflict. So when everyone started noticing that this migration flow started becoming economic feasible, then the armed forces that are not linked to the state, they capture the whole community, and that service that was provided at the beginning became something a lot more complex, and it became illegal, including human trafficking, weapons trafficking, and drugs trafficking. So a lot of migrants who do not have the $1,500 to do this transit from Necoti Turbo to the border with Panama are used to do something called hormigueo, which is transiting the border with drugs or other products to hand them to other people within this transit. They pick that up and bring it up to the border with the US. So, among the most important findings, we identified one that was very concerning. In plan, all of us are committed to the incorporation of actions that transform gender, and we believe that humanitarian actions are not part of a false debate. To and we know that girls and the children are in the very core of this, and we knew that there were specific types of violence against girls and adolescents, especially or particularly sexual violence. So the index of early pregnancy in Colombia is very high, but in this area it's very high. A lot of girls from 10 to 14 years cases were identified, and around 935 girls from 15 and 19 years old were pregnant. So that was a very important concern to us, and we try to get funds for us or start fund from other funds to deploy actions to respond to these gender-based violence. We started identifying cases of non-accompanied children and vulnerabilities associated to human trafficking for forced labor and sexual exploitation. And after that, we built up a proposal where we wanted to answer or provide responses with specific responses for menstrual issues. And sexual-based violence, and that were not in the priorities of the humanitarian response at the time. So I want to highlight something that UNICEF has been an articulation actor along with other organizations that have allowed to have this coordination that many times do not happen in other humanitarian crises. In Necoti and Turbo, there are stores where we provide different elements such as water filters or menstrual pads, everything coordinated by UNICEF, and also specific points to get access to drinkable water. So or potable water. So we focus our efforts in the protection of girls and adolescents and women who are pregnant or who are nursing or who take care of children from 0 to 5 years old. In terms of hygiene, this is one of the places where they can get access to potable water. This was done by UNICEF, but within this process, we have come across some barriers. These water tanks are used for to get potable water, but they also use it to wash dishes and things like that. And it's in a point like 50 meters away from the sea, so it can get contaminated by particles in the air. And this has brought some cases of diarrhea and illnesses caused by water. So this is a need that we still have in the field, and that we focus our attention there also to bring pills for water, and to bring filters, and to bring potable water throughout that transit. These instruments and tools are usually removed from these armed groups because they get money out of selling water as well. In terms of health, it's a poor territory. They don't have a lot of means, and the local authorities do not have the means to provide a response. So the whole health system is collapsed. So mothers and pregnant women cannot have their controls, and the care they require after delivering, and the care the child from 0 to 5 years old requires. So education, something that it's so clear in our methodologies when it comes down to the field, the implementation times are very short, and something happens too, that the time that you can spend having a dialogue with migrants could be a transfer of risks for these people, because the non-state groups that have a presence in the territory and that are identifiable, they can understand that the information given to people is risky, so that can generate more risks to those migrants. So there are some other gaps. For example, no hospital response. I mentioned before that health issues are very complex. Municipalities are very weak, and there's municipality weaknesses. In Colombia, in January this year, there was a transition of a mandate, and it hasn't allowed them to understand how big this migration phenomena is. With a particular situation, Acandí is the previous municipality before crossing the border to Panama, and Acandí is a place where the major is part of a community that are linked to human trafficking. So it's a reality. It's a elected major, and it brings additional difficulties in the territory that have become somehow a gap uh, for the entrance of humanitarian organizations. We have to be very careful in not um, uh, putting this out there, because some of those they will sell themselves as humanitarian groups while they are not. There are other gaps related to early mothers, and mothers who are nursing, and children who are not accompanied. The normative frameworks are not very clear in this, not in Panama, not in Colombia either. So the exclusive competence, my colleagues know, everything boils down to the well-being, family well-being organization. It makes it hard because they have to comply with their mandate or the internal nature of their work. So it's a complex thing. But there are some lessons learned. There are several after this. I highlight the coordination within organizations, the leadership of United Nations that have allowed that even when the response is small, it has been effective. And something that has to be kept in mind is that the proposals that tend to be in a single territory with a great infrastructure for protection are not as effective, because migration phenomena are always fluctuating, and the needs are changing from one municipality to another one. So in the case of Plan, we deployed mobile strategies that have been effective, and of course have to be articulated and coordinated, especially with the first guarantor, which is the state, and at a territorial level. Emotional and first psychological aid are super important. I am an attorney, but everyone in the team has had to learn on strategies for psychological support. This is key in this situation, in such short times that we have for interventions forced on us in a case like the Darien. I will wrap up with these. I apologize because I cannot see from my seat. Advocacy and national policies, politics. A couple of days ago, we had. Um, um, we heard about the current president in Panama who mentioned that they would close the the border and to talk about massive deportations. It generates transformations that we didn't see coming. So it becomes a challenge for us. So the mandate for protection and the right is not a single. It's not a political flag, but that it moves within a framework of legality. So we have a big challenge there. There are new municipality leaders. So there are some dynamics of articulation dialogue that is not very clear. So we have to train them for the strategies to mitigate environment impact are very important because a lot of these impact in the shores and municipalities on the Colombian side and also in Panama bring the reproduction of a xenophobia pattern. So we have to come up with the strategies to decrease that environmental impact. Um, we need to acknowledge that there are intrafamiliar violence and sexual violence and that it's increasing in this region. Humanitarian transport is important, but mainly the one for return. A lot of people who arrive and start learning become scared of crossing the jungle, and then they have issues getting money to get back to their origin places. So we have to identify new funding sources because sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't. So also the help and support to Spanish speakers. We would think that most migrants are Spanish speakers, and it's not. The patriarchal approach there is in Haiti makes a big challenge because not all organizations have the skills to answer in different languages. The humanitarian coordinated support during weekends. We know that humanitarian crises do not happen only from Monday through Friday, so we need to understand that humanitarian response needs to be happening during the weekend because the needs are still there. And of course, the most important thing is the humanitarian response. Some days ago, the Security Council ratified the duty of states to guarantee humanitarian rights and to support organizations so they can deploy their support in the different territories. And I think we still have a broad road to prioritize these humanitarian principles and to ensure neutrality and impartiality remain as a criteria for the response in these territories without missing that there are differentiated responses and that in the case of girls and adolescents and people with disabilities and the responses cannot be standardized only on the
Con eso, bueno, nuevamente les agradezco su tiempo.
that, and I appreciate the time and your.
Gracias.
Thank you, Francisco. Oliver, thank you very much. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you, Mariana and Marta, for organizing our panel to talk about Darien and the context of Darien. And that's important to mention because Darien is not just Panama, it also has parts of Darien, the Darien region is in Colombia, and these consequences and implications go beyond Panama. From highest, we want to talk about this. We want to do a joint analysis of what we're doing and what has been going on. And through this exchange of best practices that we are seeing to know what else we can do and how we can advance and take advantage of the benefits of the participating with the alliance in this. We want to give you a brief video of what highest does for the children, especially in Darien.
En los últimos años, múltiples amenazas en el mundo ponen en riesgo a la niñez, en especial a la refugiada y migrante. A pesar de las serias amenazas que representa para el bienestar y futuro de millones de niñas y niños, hay una crisis que pasa desapercibida para muchas personas. Se trata del Darién, la peligrosa selva entre Colombia y Panamá que en 2023 fue atravesada por medio millón de personas. Según UNICEF, más de 30.000 niñas y niños han hecho este viaje en lo que va del 2024, un aumento del 40% respecto al año pasado, casi 2.000 de ellos sin sus padres o cuidadores. Esta selva es extremadamente riesgosa. La niñez que la cruza enfrenta amenazas de violencia, enfermedades y desnutrición. En Hayas, creamos espacios amigables para niñas y niños, donde reciben apoyo psicosocial y participan en actividades recreativas, mientras sus padres o cuidadores acceden a servicios esenciales como asesoría legal. En algunas localidades brindamos gestión de casos para niñas y niños, no acompañados y separados, incluida la referencia de casos transfronterizos. Nuestro enfoque regional coordinado entre Colombia, Panamá, Costa Rica y Honduras busca que la niñez expuesta a violencia de género reciba la ayuda que necesita. Gracias a ello, asistimos a más de 100.000 personas en 2023. 6 de cada 10 fueron mujeres y niñas. Los altos números de niñas y niños en movimiento nos enfrentan grandes desafíos como la falta de servicios disponibles, el acceso limitado y las dificultades para seguir casos de alto riesgo. A pesar de esto, buscamos soluciones, colaboramos con Naciones Unidas, autoridades, actores locales y priorizamos la asignación de recursos para maximizar el impacto. También realizamos monitoreos periódicos de protección para entender mejor las necesidades de la niñez y de sus familias. Así, adaptamos nuestra respuesta para abordar los riesgos que enfrentan. A través de nuestras 3 oficinas en terreno en estos 4 países, nos aseguramos que la niñez en tránsito por el Darién tenga la oportunidad de un futuro seguro y protegido. Conoce más sobre nuestro trabajo para las niñas y niños en el Darién y más allá. Síguenos en LinkedIn como Hayas, América Latina y el Caribe.
But if you want to know more about this work, we have a one pager that you can download from that QR code. And I understand that they're going to be sharing all the presentations with every one of you, so you can also get it there. We talk about the context, and it's important to know what has happened in this region throughout the years. I don't know if many of you know about Darien and the mixed flows, migration flows through Darien. It's important that we talk about mixed flows movement because you have people that cross here through international protection as well. In Central America, historically, immigration has been from Central America, from the so called Northern Triangle to the United States. And through this Darien gap, there has been a historic flow of immigration, but it was very small. We're talking about the decade of the 90s, where it was a group of Colombian refugees, and specifically in this region, from this region. And then it was up to 2009, 2010, and 2011 when we started seeing people from other continents crossing through Darien. Just for to give you an idea, in 2011, 2012, there were 3,000 people that would cross Darien, meaning people from other continents. And this caused a regional emergency that they created an ad hoc working group to understand the situation for the countries in the region. And that was 3,000 people. Now we're talking about more than 500,000 people. Francisco just mentioned about the flow of Cuban population from 2015 2016, and then with an increased presence of Haitians as well, that started opening up these roads, not only from Colombian side but also in Panama and in Costa Rica. They continue to do so. Then we started with the 2018 2019 Venezuelan crisis. All of this, including people that were coming in from other continents. This is an issue that has been relatively recent, where maybe not all of us have the experience to be able to respond to the needs of these people, specifically for children. That is why one of the advantages of this, or the analysis that we do over here on this, is that we have all been learning and growing together, from government agencies to UN agencies and NGOs that are in the fields. And these changes, from dynamics with the flow, because as the flow increases, then violence towards people also increases, unfortunately, and needs increase and gaps increase as well. This has allowed us to improve. We now talk a lot about coordination. I think that that is the most important point that we want to touch across this today. This has allowed us to improve and adapt our response. Now we want to talk about innovation. I want to talk to you about a program that Highest has. I want to talk about a program that Highest has that has been acknowledged as one of the 10 best practices that has been identified by the UNICEF Global Migration Network, sorry, the International Migration Review Forum. They do a 2 year assessment, and I'm going to talk to you about it. It's nothing out of hard to understand. It's a multi-sectorial approach where we mainstream child protection with a cross-border focus. Like I said, we are learning and we're growing, and we continue to adapt as well. It is impossible to continue answering to the risk needs of uh, boys, girls, and adolescents in the region, and without taking into consideration the consequences that will arise from those actions. When we talk about children transiting through this region, we are talking about quick transit. It's already been mentioned previously, and this quick transit is one of the main challenges that impede that we are properly able to manage the cases of children and to provide the attention as needed, especially in the psychosocial sphere. We're also going to talk about education, which was previously mentioned as well. And this is why we designed this program first between internally between highest offices in Costa Rica, Colombia, Panama, and now we've included Honduras, which is a regional focus or approach that has a strong organizational component between agencies and offices. We spoken about program this program that it starts in Coclí in Colombia, passing through Darien, uh, include transiting through the north and southern borders of Costa Rica, and now reaching Honduras as well, and that we hope can cover the entire route through Mexico to the United States. It's a program that looks to alleviate suffering and mitigate the loss of life. It focuses on services that include case management when dealing with gender based violence and sexual violence, but it also includes safe and secure spaces, safe and secure spaces for boys, girls, and adolescents, safe spaces for women. It includes access to medical care in conjunction with other organizations. And when we talk about legal protection, is all the legal advisory that we can provide from our offices and together with other organizations in regards to protection services and access to protection services that can be found in these countries. And it's also very important to mention that the information be available. Uh, Informed immigration is powerful for people. We continue to see cases that even though people may know the area or may know the risk, they continue to be tricked by people and they continue thinking that they're in Mexico or making them think that they're in the US and they continue charging them more and more monies. As as an organization, we suffer from risk. Highest continues to provide information many times verbally, but we've also shown the news has shown that we also have some maps because people need to know the route as well. They need to be properly informed. So now we become the agency that promotes immigration to the U.S. It doesn't matter. We continue doing our work. We have two specific chapters that have to do on women and adolescents. One of them specifically for women and adolescents in transit, and the other one is for women and adolescents in communities, in spaces of where they decide where they're staying. And we've been adapting these approaches to the context of rapid movement or rapid transit. Our uh, the population that we're treating are the most vulnerable ones. They're the ones that face the largest amount of risk in gender and sexual based violence. because this is the largest percentage of women and girls. The case management, as was spoken by my colleagues, is very important because the transit is so quick sometimes that sometimes it's impossible to provide follow-up care and support when they pass through the region, but we can do it along the route. We talk about data protection and transfer of information, which is an increasingly important issue when we are when these people are transiting through different countries. We continue to talk to people within our offices, not re-victimizing these migrants, but continues to focus on children and women. But it has an important case of monitoring and protection. It's not just enough that we have all the data on trends and analyzing constant and updated information. But it's also important for us to use the data to do advocacy, but to do advocacy based on evidence. Otherwise, it is of no use. I'm not going to extend myself. I promise this is very brief. I have only two more slides. The first thing that we want to do is we want to talk about challenges, but we have to continue repeating this. We continue talking about very high numbers of boys, girls, and adolescents. More than 23% of people that travel or transit through this area are boys, girls, and adolescents. But they have a series of significant protective issues. We are seeing and we're very concerned how these cases of sexual violence in Darien have been growing, and not just a number, they're increasing in cruelty. And children continue to be the main victims of this violence. We can't close our eyes. This is the main challenge. We have a huge gap in this area, in this, and these protection issues are not just sexual violence; it's just generalized violence. It's issues, it's health-related issues. We did a needs-based analysis at the end of last year, and all children, boys and girls, and their families, all of them have some sort of health problem, some disease that they may have got, whether it was a skin condition or an illness or an STD, but all of them had something. So it's a huge challenge as to how we can continue supporting or dealing with these issues because we are affected because we are all in this field. We are ever increasing amount of people supporting the people transiting through the area, but the numbers continue to increase. This rapid transit through this area makes it difficult for us to provide adequate services and to make it almost impossible to do the follow up for cases for boys and girls, especially those that are at greater risk. We have to say things without any shyness. The support of government and agencies has been very limited, even though we've been increasing and we've been learning together, including the authorities. They have also learned and they have the willingness, but the support has been very limited. The work that the organizations are doing on the field is not to overcome the gaps of the authorities of the government, but it's just to support them both. We need to continue promoting the support and continue to promote the need for the governments or authorities to take ownership of this. The safety and security issues continue to be a challenge. Safety, security, logistics are very difficult. We are getting paid to be there. We're blessed to be able to serve and to help. But the issue of funds, we have to talk about that. It's a limited access to funds. It's a harsh reality, and part of the lessons learned is that we have to be pragmatic and work with what we have and with what is available. And this leads me to the last slide when we talk about key slides and recommendation findings and recommendations. I'm going to talk about one that hasn't been mentioned: investment in human resources. It's very difficult to find them because to find human resources because this has never happened before in this region. One of the lessons we've learned that with the limited resources we have eh, we have not stopped training the personnel, the staff, so that they can improve in the work that they're doing. We continue navigating complexity. Not, it's just not high, it's everyone. We have innovated with what we have. Even though we're responding to the context of an emergency, we've also known how to be strategically plan to look beyond the front of our hands to see what else we can do in these emergencies. This is an emergency that happens in many parts of the area, but it's a cruel type of violence. It's not the typical context of an emergency, and it's crucial for us to work with local stakeholders. Francisco has mentioned it, Panama with receiving communities and Costa Rica with receiving communities. And here also we talk about authorities, the resources that we've talked about. That's part of the adaptation. This adaptation with the resources that we have, it promotes innovation. We have to prioritize the allocation of resources to maximize impact. This leads me to the next point, which has to do with interagency coordination. This is in order to pool the resources that we have. We're not talking about protocols and action paths or routes and to define and coordinate it or dividing the spaces for us to be able to perform within certain geographic regions. It's to have effective communication and shared goals amongst ourselves, but also to be transparent and honest. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but there's something that I've always called the humanitarian mercenaries. Those of us who work in the humanitarian context know what I'm talking about because the resources are limited and they're always fought amongst other agencies. And for example, I'm not going to tell someone else what I'm doing because then they're going to steal my proposals so that they can give it to the donors. Or I'm not going to tell them what I got from the donors from a particular donor because then they'll go and ask the donors and then the donors will cut me off or will not give me more money. This is what happens. We've learned how to speak with transparency amongst ourselves. So I'm being honest here and sincere. And it's important to know what everybody has. We've been able to know what the budget for everyone, what resources they have. And this has allowed us to impact in a greater way the actions that we undertake as well. When we talk about continuous oversight and community led approaches, this is going to be crucial for our programs to be more welcoming. It will allow us to adapt to the changes and flows. It will allow us to adapt to new authorities. We have those challenges on a continuous basis, but we need to know how to be jointly intelligent to be able to take maximize the support that we provide. For example, when you talk about monitoring in emergencies, this talks about providing ongoing education to boys and girls. There's other programs that Save the Children leads in the region, which highest is an implementing partner in Costa Rica and Panama, which is to provide education in the context of emergencies. We in another moment, I hope that you approach me and we can talk about this. And I apologize for the time that I've taken, but I want to talk about the donors and the funds. Highest began this program with its own funds, with emergency funds. And we started covering Colombia and Panama. And then, thanks to the support of our donors, especially of the Spanish Cooperation Agency and of UNHCR, but as well as the private sector, Hilton Foundation, we have been able to expand this program to Costa Rica and Honduras. And now I'm very pleased to mention that we're going to strengthen this program with a health component, at least for the time being in Colombia and in Panama through the Drive Fund. This is lessons learned. If we're able to coordinate amongst ourselves, if we are able to have a focus on the roadmap, taking into focus the difficult context that we're facing, we will be able to attract more funds. And in that way, we will be able to allocate those same resources to the people for whom we are working and serving. Thank you very much. I think that there's very little left to say. The team has done a presentation of what is being done in Darien and around Darien and the most important context in the concerns in the region. With this closing remark of institutional collaboration, we start reflecting of how collaboration, how communication and joint efforts and works will mean greater benefits for the people that we want to attend and serve. We go to the Q&A part of the presentation. If you have any, please, this is the moment to do so. Thank you. Thank you to our speakers for updating us on the Darien situation. I have a question for the UNICEF colleague in Panama, and it has to do with children and unaccompanied minors and separated minors that y'all are been facing. You, we either implement a the government protection route, or do we just let adolescents and minors pass through? And I wanted to know what has been Panama's experience when facing that there were you mentioned the amount of or the percentage of unaccompanied minors that tend to be mostly adolescents, and the practice that you all have of the response that you all have done when facing this, and also if you have any successful experience when you talk about different options beyond institutionalization for adolescents specifically. And less than 15 years ago, uh, Colombian government signed an MOU with Panama for family reunification and search. But I know that this is an agreement between Panama and Colombia and Panama. But I think it opens the opportunity with the MOU for Venezuela, because that means that we could have Panama for Colombian and Panamanian children, and Colombia with Venezuelan and Colombian children. And I think that we should think about a regional one, because if most of them are Venezuelans, then we should think about one between Panama and Venezuela, and following the principles of of utmost support and benefits. Thank you, colleague. I'm going to try to give you an answer for all the questions that you've made, but I basically want to let you know that the issue of unaccompanied and separated minors and the issue of immigration in Panama is done through a government, through a security agency. For Panama, it represents an issue of national security. All the cases that we have identified in the fields, we report them to the competent authorities, and what they do is to verify. For example, in the case of separated minors, if the person with whom was they're traveling or transiting with is a family relationship, what type of blood relations do they have? Yeah, if they have any authorization, or if they require any additional authorization in the case of separated minors. In the case of unaccompanied minors, the competent authority is in charge of determining what is the protective mechanism that is adequate for the situation. There are cases where the parents are in Mexico or in the US, and then you can see that the minor is transiting, so that can transit because they're traveling. In the cases of minors, we can see that they are not just unaccompanied or they're not adolescents, but they become adolescents around the route, and they end up being emancipated. But there are cases of reunification or voluntary returns that have taken place between the government and the different ministries of foreign affairs, Ecuador, Chile, Colombia, Venezuela, for example. We accompany this process, but for Panama, we have the CENIAF agency in Panama that has to deal with minors, adolescents, and families. They do the work in the receiving country, not in the destination country. Carolyn has mentioned, there is a transitional shelter, which is where those unaccompanied minors that reach the migration reception booth or office, but whose parents continue to still in the jungle. Sometimes there are 2 or 3 days of travel different. The minor or adolescent was able to advance faster, or were transferred to another person for them to take them faster than the parents. And here we also find difficulties. The house, this transitional shelters boys from 0 to 12 years of age, and girls from 0 until 17 years of age. And in most of the cases, we can see adolescent teens that are greater than 12 years of age, especially boys. And they have to go to a separate area of the transitional center so that the competent authority can determine their migratory status or whether they can continue on their journey or not. They determine what will happen with that particular case. I don't know if you have any other question, Caroline, if you would like to answer or say anything else. I want to talk about what Vladimir stated. This is a gap that we have. It is a gap that we have in regards to males, because at the beginning they would stay at the custodial hall, just sleeping on the floor while their cases were being managed, so on and so forth. Now we have a space that we've been able to adapt with some mattresses and a little bit more of security. So these people can stay at the immigration reception area. And this is in front of the police unit offices, so that we make sure that they do not, that these children do not fall into harm. Many of them, as Vladimir has stated, are minors that are alone. They've been left alone for a very long time, and then many times they would end up uh, being boys that are younger than 18 years of age. In most cases, less than 16 years of age, and they can stay there in that shelter in those areas until their cases are managed. But it's not always that these boys are going, or children are going to get support from legal advisory services. So once they turn 18, then these boys can leave the shelter, but they don't have any other support once they leave from there. That's a gap that we have mainly when we talk about male adolescents. Thank you. We have a question here and here. No? Okay. And then we can leave because we've already passed the time frame allotted. It's a query that I have more than a question. In 2022, we did an exercise of trying to think about coordination, and there were 50 agencies that arrived in Kokli. That was many of them. What we identified was that there wasn't uh, enough communication between Darien, El Kokli, and Turbo. Now, as I understand it, that there's better communication between Panama and Colombia in regards to services that we are proffering. I just wanted to clear this up. And the question in the issue of case management that you mentioned with the issue of route building, I want to believe that there's a pilot project or a study that is being doing on case management where we identify the child, and when that child gets to Honduras, we follow the sequence of these children so that we don't do a revictimization process where that person reaches Panama and we do case management, and then again when they arrive in Guatemala, then there's another, they repeat a case management, and when they get to Mexico, they do a third case management for that same child. I want to understand this a little bit, please. Very well. The first question that you mentioned is, I'm glad that you mentioned it. Amongst the highest offices, we do work, and we work a lot better because we have this coordination and communication that didn't exist before. But other organizations also do it. Red is doing it. Plan does not have an office or presence in Panama, but UNICEF is doing it. UNHCR is doing it. All organizations are doing it. What's next is that we do it jointly. We already have the coordinating groups, both in Colombia as well as in Panama. What continues is that for all of us to disclose or transmit the news, if we already have our roadmaps in Panama and they have them in Colombia, why not think about thinking about these protocols of having something that is more homogeneous, something more inter agency viable? If not, let's work on it. The issue of case management, at least in the case of highest, is an issue that we're not piloting anymore. It's a fact. We were piloting it and it wasn't a concrete fact. But because of the issue of data protection, we cannot begin with case management that is done informally if we're not 120% sure that we have the backing of the adequate data. In this case, in the case of EcoClean, we can understand whether it's a boy, girl, or an adolescent. They have to go through through the self system. This person in Colombia has that information, and that information is encrypted, and just the case manager has access to that information, meaning nobody else can have it. So now we're covering the data information aspect in order, and also a re-victimization aspect. So we have Colombia, Panama, Costa Rica, and now Honduras. The ideal scenario would be to continue, but there's something that we are closely monitoring because the route continues to expand. For example, from Colombia or Honduras, obviously it's linear because nobody knows what happens through Nicaragua, but then that road widens. That is where we would get a lot of help when we talk about your influence and your suggestions. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I would like to know more about the shelter that you spoke about. This transitional shelter remains for civil society in Panama? Very well. And then I had another query. You also spoke about the shelter, but I would like to know if you have a temporary shelter for families when they come from the jungle situation. And then I wanted to know about Colombia, Francisco, that you also spoke that the services for safe spaces and closing, is that because Saturday and Sunday doesn't work? Because in Brazil, it works every day of the week. The issue of transitional shelter, it's a home or a shelter for boys and girls that are being separated or that are mainly unaccompanied. It's for people at the province of Darien. We also have the Emberan indigenous sites. This shelter has about a capacity for 16 to 20 children. But seeing the numbers that you have studied, we've gone through the maximum legal limit, for example, 30 or 40%. And this shelter is under the purview and supervision and oversight of the competent authority, which is the CENIAF, the Secretaries of Infant, Adolescents, and Family. They're in charge of the government of this work together with the local society called uh, Sociedad Benéfica. This is a beneficial party, and what we do as UNICEF is that we support the function and CENIAF, the technical and operational strengthening, and to ensure that we are able to discover the greatest amount of needs of children. Children can be there up to 3 days maximum, but there are cases that due to how delicate as vulneration of their rights. They're there for a month or a month and a half because if a child needs to be, but if a child needs to be greater than that, then they're sent to a shelter more in the context of Panama City and is not specialized for migrant children, but in general ways. With Carolyn, when all of us spoke about immigrational transfer centers, these are physical points where they talk about the center where we have agencies where my colleagues have the opportunity to continue. They can stay for a day or 2 days ago, 2 months, 2 weeks. We haven't seen cases that are longer than 2 months of people that have been staying longer than that. We have seen them, but we haven't been able to get rid of it. We always try to find the reason as to why it's happening with the family, and we're always running around doing our weekly or monthly visits to these homes. The common element is that they spend the night or just a few hours receiving the services and they continue in a controlled transit. Very well. Having said that, that answers Deborah very quickly in regards to the question that you have. These are spaces that are not institutionalization spaces, meaning the places for these are not child protection or recovery for boys, girls, and adolescents. This has to do more with dealing with education and with boys, girls, while their other parents are working. And the hours are office hours and in spaces of 8 to 5 on the weekends. Again, the challenge in the region is to be able to understand that the immigration transit does not respond directly to independent authorities, but actually we have to start thinking about as organizations working together. Thank you very much to the panel members. Thank you for sharing all of this information and to all of you for being here today with us. Thank you.